Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater, home of the UCLA Film and Television Archive's public programs. I'm Nicole Lucetto, the programming coordinator for the archive. I am thrilled to introduce tonight's program, which is the Los Angeles premiere of Reality Frictions, followed by Bontoc Eulogy. This free screening, along with all of our year-round public programming, is made possible by the generosity of an anonymous donor, and we are grateful for their support. Special thanks to tonight's community partner, Leong Network SoCal, a local to global network working to amplify the calls to action of grassroots communities in the Philippines. You can learn more about them at their website, leongnetwork.org. And a big thank you as well to tonight's theater team, including theater manager Lauren Brown, projectionist Alex Blevins, and the entire student team. So let's give them a round of applause. Real quick, if you haven't gotten program notes, Adam is giving them out right now, so if you want to raise your hand, he can bring them to you. Yes, covered, everyone. Well, we'll have them out also in the lobby. It's always really great to work with faculty and staff at the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. And today I am especially excited that we get to host the premiere of Professor Steve Anderson's Reality Frictions. Several years ago, when I was a student at UCLA, Steve introduced the video essay format to me, along with films like Tom Anderson's Los Angeles Plays Itself. And which the film you're about to see references, so it really feels like a full circle moment. Reality Frictions sourced footage from over 100 films, mostly from Hollywood studios, reflecting on the desire to depict or fabricate truth on screen. One of the films referenced in Reality Frictions is Marlon Fuentes' documentary Bontoc Eulogy, a film that investigates the events that occurred in the life of the filmmaker's grandfather, Marcad, who along with many Igorot people was displayed in the St. Louis World Fair in 1904. When we began conversations about putting together the screening, many of the Hollywood films portrayed in Steve's essay film didn't feel like exactly the right fit for tonight. And then Adam suggested Bontoc Eulogy, a film that Los Angeles Filmforum had previously screened, and the program just clicked together. Marlon was excited to have his film shown in this program. In his later career, he had switched to practicing more photography, but this was a film that was very important in his life. And sadly, Marlon passed away suddenly during the process of putting together this program. We're honored to get to show his film tonight and pay tribute to his life and artistic career, and also want to thank his family, who was really excited to have this be shown tonight and helped us source the film. Before we get into the films, I'd like to introduce Adam Hyman, the executive director and head programmer for Los Angeles Filmforum, to say a few words, and then Steve will come on stage afterwards.
Hi all, greetings. I'm Adam Hyman, the Filmforum. For those of you who are new to Filmforum, we're the city's longest running organization that screens experimental and avant-garde film, video art, documentaries, animation, but all artist-driven, non-commercial, handcrafted work. And we're in our 50th year. And so we're having a series for which this is the third one of events for our 50th mixes of works we've shown before, of works by people who have been affiliated with Filmforum, classic works from Los Angeles, and more. And we're having another one this Sunday. Naomi Uman is a wonderful filmmaker, and the LA premiere of her feature film Three Sparks, which was filmed in Albania. Naomi is now based in Mexico City, but when I started volunteering at Filmforum in 1996, Naomi was one of the projectionists. And we'll also be showing with Three Sparks her short film Removed, which is just a fabulous short experimental film that played a lot around 2000 or so. And if you haven't had a chance to see that, please come, and she'll be in person. I brought this image for you because the first public show that I have found record of for Filmforum, which started in Pasadena, was Zero to Conduit by Jean Vigo, and it was on December 12th, 1975. So it's exactly 50 years ago today that we showed you that classic. So I really wanted to thank Steve, who also was once upon a time a Filmforum board member, but for continuing the tradition of great essay filmmaking and for sending this our way and allowing us to be able to present it to you. And Bontoc Eulogy, as Nicole just said, we screened it in 2007 with Marlon Fuentes in person in conjunction with a few shows we did with this book, which you will not be able to see at this distance, but it is called F is for Phony, Fake Documentary and Truth's Undoing, edited by Alex U. Haas and Jesse Lerner. And we did a few shows related to that. If you can find it, which is not easy, there's a chapter in it by Fuentes called Extracts from an Imaginary Interview, Questions and Answers about Bontoc Eulogy, which is a more detailed set of questions and answers he posed to himself as in essay or interview form. So I don't know if it's the best to be read aloud, but that said, I'm going to read a short bit just so you know what he was also thinking. And because the first question is, what was the impetus in making this film? My work in photography was being generated by an increasingly narrative subtext, ideas about duration and the use of history and ritual and their artifacts. I was also fascinated by how certain bodies of knowledge and their representational strategies were codified into structures and surfaces that had their own intrinsic valences and ways of reception. For example, anthropology, and specifically ethnographic film, had historically contained epistemological assumptions about the other. These are deeply embedded in a historical tradition that can be traced to the early 18th century. On a personal level, I wanted to locate myself within the historical narratives that define the Filipino in America. Art for me has always been an orienting device, and I thought that film was a good medium that could capture the process of passage through the membranes we navigate. It is only in retrospect that a lot of the events that happen to us make sense. In this context, narrativizing discrete yet incomplete fragments of our memories becomes a vital way of knowing where we fit in the grander scheme of things. Growing older necessitates looking back, if only to reassure oneself that the increasing velocity by which we experience the passage of time has some meaning. Film has the power to impose a sense of order, purpose, and interconnectedness onto this vortex of events. There will be obvious linkages between what Bontoc Eulogy works at second and what Steve calls to our attention in Reality Frictions. And its wonderful presentation with how constructed documentary and constructed fiction speak to each other, and how they speak to each other for the audience and the audience's needs and truth statements, let's say, the finding of what things ring true, and much more than that. But with that, please join me in welcoming Steve Anderson, who is also, I'm doing the one-liner, the UCLA Professor of Film, Television, and Digital Media, and is also the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs in the School of Arts and Architecture here at UCLA. Please join me in welcoming Steve Anderson.
So thanks, and thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks especially to Nicole, Adam, and Diego, who's going to be our interviewer after the film is over, for this invitation. It's really, for me, an incredible honor to be part of the Filmforum's 50th anniversary. And I just want to say a few things about how important this organization has been to me. It's true I was a board member for 10 years, about 10 years ago, but my history with Filmforum actually goes back to 1984 when I saw my first Filmforum screening of Hollis Frampton's Zorn's Lemma at the Wallen Boyd Space, which was downtown. More importantly, in 1992, the first film I ever made, which was my thesis film at Cal Arts, had its premiere at Filmforum downtown on Industrial Street in 1992. I was included on a program with Stan Brakhage and Sue Friedrich, and it was reviewed by Kevin Thomas in the LA Times, and I couldn't believe any of it. I remember thinking, this is what I want to do forever. Later in the 90s, the Filmforum series Scratching the Belly of the Beast was also the first place I ever saw the person I would later marry. I didn't meet her then because I was too shy, but I first saw Holly Willis, who was a Filmforum board member for many years, and also one of the curators of that program, and now she's the producer of this film. I also want to acknowledge Eric Marin, who's sitting right there in the middle. You see, that's where you sit if you're a sound mixer. Eric is responsible for the 5.1 mix that you're going to hear tonight, and if you're sitting on the edges, you should move over there in the middle. Anyway, experimental filmmaking for me, probably like most people, turned out to be less of a vocation and more of a passion. And I just want to express my sincere thanks to Adam and a handful of other passionate individuals who have kept this organization running for so long with so little thanks, no pay at all. And it really has been something that's been an extraordinary presence in the history of this city. And lastly, I want to say what an honor it is to be programmed with Marlon Fuentes and Bontoc Eulogy, which was a pivotal film for me back in the 90s when I was in graduate school and starting my dissertation. And that film had just come out, and it sparked a whole wave of other fake documentaries which called into question the relationship between truth and fiction, which is what this film is all about. So thank you all for coming, and I look forward to talking after the film.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to jump right in. I have a lot of thoughts racing through my mind, but I'll start with the ending, with the credits. Holly Willis producing, Eric Marin sound design. And what came to me, actually, I had no idea this was going to come. I thought of Tom Anderson's Get Out of the Car and how he made it with colleagues at CalArts, Craig Smith, who did the sound design there. And I remember Eric Marin when he was my teacher in sound design at UCLA a couple decades ago. And so I'd maybe to start there, the team that you made this film with, and colleagues and partner, and what was that like to, and just the other last thing with Get Out of the Car with Tom Anderson, just a film that I thought, wow, this is like get out of the way for cinema, like a love letter to the city. Get Out of the Car by Tom Anderson. This is like a love letter to cinema, and but I'll get to that later.
Okay. So you can ask me about any Tom Anderson film except Get Out of the Car, because I have never seen it. But in terms of the team, I actually regard this as a project that was developed very communally. So yes, Holly produced, Eric did the brilliant sound design and mix, but I kind of did the editing and writing on my own. That said, it started in a class, and it might have been the one that you were in, Nicole, at UCLA, a video essay class where I was developing most of the material. I've been collecting this stuff for years, and my process is a little bit unusual in that when I'm collecting material, I don't just keep it on my own hard drive. I actually put everything out in the world. So it goes on a public media archive that I administer called Critical Commons. And so kind of the idea is to try to not just be writing in public, not just be expressing in public, but actually researching in public and opening up the archive that we are working with to anybody else who might be interested. So there's this unfortunate tendency in the academy sometimes to think you have to hoard your research materials and don't let anybody know what you're working on until it comes out in publication. And this is kind of the opposite of that. So a lot of the references came, yes, from the Vivian Sobchak book and that concept of documentary consciousness. A bunch of the examples came directly out of her work. But a lot of the other ones came from the Visible Evidence listserv. So documentary film studies, I just put out a call to that list, like any examples that you can think of, intrusions of the real world into fictional films, and I was bombarded with responses from this community. So it was really kind of, social media, it wasn't even social media, it was just an email listserv provided a bunch of the research from people who just think about this sort of thing all the time. So beyond that, I did cuts and sort of work in progress screenings with my class, showed it to people, did a couple of screenings, test screenings at UCLA. So it was both an isolated and individual process and also a very community-oriented one.
That's great. And can you say a little bit about the collecting? It almost seemed like a cabinet of curiosities within the cinema framework, but I know you also have a background in collecting with Critical Commons. If you can say a little bit about Critical Commons and also a little more of how that became part of maybe what maybe guided you a bit in the construction of the film, or how it played a role in it.
Okay, excuse me. Now I want to go back to Tom Anderson.
Okay.
So around the time I graduated from Cal Arts, I moved to Washington, D.C. for other reasons. And Tom and Noel Birch were just starting to work on a film called Red Hollywood. And so they enlisted me as their research assistant. And my job was to go to the Madison building of the National Archive and look up who the copyright holders were for the dozens and dozens of films that they were using in Red Hollywood, which was this amazing kind of revisionist history about the blacklist era. And they relied on many dozens of clips from studio films. And so I would go and look up who the copyright holder. So remember that you used to have to register copyrights, and if you didn't, your film would fall into the public domain after 14 or 28 years. And so I had to look up to see which films were actually still in copyright, see who the copyright owner was, and how much they would charge for Tom and Noel to use a 15-second clip of their films. And invariably, the answer was between $50 and $300 a second. And it's like, no, this is Tom and Noel. These guys don't have any money. And even if they had money, the studios reserved the right to decide which stories they wanted told about their films. And they actually wanted to know what the context was that it would be appearing in, all of these things that are completely unreasonable and impossible to imagine. And I remember Tom saying, yeah, I won't try to do him. But it really shouldn't just be the studios that have control over the writing of history. And I think that one statement shaped much of the next 25 years of my life, because I did start working on experimental historiography. My first book was about that. That's where the Marlon Fuentes connection came in. But I also founded this public media archive, which is, in Rick Pralinger's terms, appropriation friendly. Meaning that you can upload and download anything at full resolution. It consists of entirely unlicensed media. Sometimes people go to put things on the site where they own the rights, and I say, we don't want it. We only want things that you don't have the rights to, and they are placed in a transformative context, in a critical context, and then that becomes part of this sort of researching in public, sort of a sharing of resources.
And well, that kind of sharing of resources is part of the Critical Commons, from what I've remember, and I know it's not. I can't find it in the same place I used to go to for many years at the Critical Commons. I think it's on another site, but just that sharing that Critical Commons serves. I find that here too, it's like a sharing of, just to be frank, it's like I'm back in graduate school and I'm in a cinema studies class, and within the film, whether I'm watching it in the movie theater, which is very special, it hits much harder, or if I'm watching it on a computer screen or even phone, it's like a course, a master's course, but a serious one that reminds me of more of the cinema pedagogy Jean-Luc Godard used to talk about, and many others. So the teachings, the sharing, and it's more of a sharing than a teaching, that's happening here is huge. And is there? And I know that Critical Commons is a lot about that. So if you can, I don't know, just say a little bit about that sharing, especially with the public, and how that is an element in the film, if it is.
Sure. So I'm a real believer in work in progress. And in the video essay class, there's this insistence that everybody has to bring in their cuts at every single stage, especially when they're not ready to show things. And so in the class where this project got significantly developed, I imposed that same expectation on myself. So I had to do the thing that I never, ever, ever want to do, which is to show things before they're ready, but I did it. And that became such an important part of the feedback loop. And people gave me all kinds of advice and suggestions. And one of them was, since you're talking about the kind of the pedagogical function of the project, The first few versions of this were full of quotations and citations and long explanations of how semiotics works. And basically the feedback that I got was, take that out. You know, for the love of God, if you want this to be a watchable movie, we don't want to hear that stuff. You know, save it for your lectures, save it for the academic context. And I did aspire for this film to find audiences outside of the classroom, outside of the university. And so I did. And it's an interesting challenge because when you do that, you know, are you dumbing it down? Are you losing something about the argument or what you're trying to say? And so the challenge becomes, how do I refer to Vivian's idea or Laura Mulvey's argument here or Stuart Hall without citing them, and actually just making that something that I invoke or invite people to who maybe know the text, or Saidiya Hartman, people who maybe recognize that gesture, critical fabulation, without having to name it, without having to cite the author of it. Now that's something that I think I'm at a place in my career and my professional life where I can do that. I don't necessarily, a bunch of my graduate students are here, and thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. But give it a few years before you start dropping the citations and the references. There are people who still expect to see that stuff. So I think there is the pedagogical function works on a lot of levels. I'd like it when these films can be received on different tiers. And some people are like, I recognize, I know that movie, and those references. And other people who are like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of that before. So that's, to me, the beauty of videographic scholarship as opposed to academic publishing, where I doubt if this many people in this room right now have read my 2 books combined, right? But I've had the privilege of showing this film now in front of about a dozen audiences, and I feel confident that I've actually reached more people with this than I have with the other 20 years of my academic career.
And just to connect a little bit, technologies of history and technologies of vision with the film, I just finished reading Technologies of Vision, and I love Technologies of History. Had me thinking so widely about the intersection of technology and cinema and culture, and now with Technologies of Vision, I saw kind of the understanding myself, my generation, the 2000s, a little before that, of course, after that, but with the film, it occurred to me today that this is a similar kind of just sorting through more contemporary history and where we're at. And it was very strong in terms of it's an analysis of cinema, and but at the same time, it's an analysis of what's going on in our world. And the film in particular, it's very relatively current. The 2010s and the first half of the 2020s, almost to a couple years ago, the references of the films and the commentary. So just that kind of I mean, in a sense, it's a documentary consciousness, but that's happening in your books, that's happening in your film, a telling and sorting through, making sense of our history, and this film, our current history. If you can say a little bit about if that was part of the role that it played.
Sure, and I have to say I'm in awe of you reading those books in preparation for this. That's just amazing. So you know, there's kind of this standard conventional wisdom in you know, when we write about films, historical films, right? That they're about the moment that they're about, but they're also about the moment in which they are made. And actually, you know, Marlon's film, Bontoc Eulogy, came out in '95. There was a whole bunch of these films: Jesse Lerner's Ruins, Cheryl Dunye's Watermelon Woman, Peter Jackson's Forgotten Silver. There was a lot of experimentation with the idea of history and what we could know about the past through these experimental films. And that just happened to be the moment when I entered graduate school, and that was like the thing that I latched onto because it seemed to be such a very current issue for that moment in time. This, you know, this film, I think, spans, I've been collecting these clips for much longer, or noticing things and thinking like, yeah, I should really try to get my hands on that. I'll say this about streaming media, because it makes it so much more difficult to actually work with the media that we take in as consumers. Streaming media just washes over us, and there's no way for us to capture it, to grab it, or it's difficult or illegal to do that. When things were on hard media, when things were on DVDs and Blu-rays, we had exemptions to the DMCA that let us capture those things, to work with them, to put them in our electronic publications, to make videographic work like this. Streaming media is an apocalypse for our ability to work with media, and I hate it, and I hate that we pay for it. But there's no choice anymore. Anyway, sorry, that's a digression. Yeah, I lost the train of thought. In the course of finishing this film, it did begin to seem like it was important to get it done now. And I think that was because of, the current presidential administration, but also the rise of generative AI. And some of that's in here, but some of those examples are quite a few years old now, and things have come an awful long way since then. But what I was hearing from my colleagues, some of whom are documentary filmmakers, was generative AI is going to undermine our ability to speak our truths on film. I was like, come on, guys. We haven't believed what you've been telling us on film forever. We know that documentaries are this combination of fact and fiction with good intent behind them. But it isn't the fault of generative AI if, their veracity is being called into question. And so I really did feel like I wanted to make the argument that, generative AI brings its own set of problems, but these are boundaries that we've been negotiating for a long time. And we have some skills at doing that. We are not just, idiotic stooges of, OpenAI and the other companies that are putting this stuff out into the world. We can do what we have always had to do, which is do some additional research, triangulate our sources, think about whether something actually makes sense, or is it something that's obviously been generated by software. So those kinds of things, I think, are very much a part of the moment that we're in. A few years from now, things are changing very quickly, and those skills that we've developed may no longer be as applicable or as reassuring as I feel like we can still hold on to some of that right now. But I think that's very much a part of the reason that I wanted people to see this film at this particular moment in time.
Yeah, I remember about a couple decades ago when I was at UCLA that we would talk about the resuscitation machines and how painting was challenged by photography. It didn't kill photography. Sorry, it didn't kill painting. It was challenged by photography. Later, cinema challenged photography, didn't kill photography. And even the TV challenged cinema. It didn't kill cinema, and the internet and computer, etc. And now we're in another iteration, and there's the freak out of it's going to kill what came before it, rather than the challenge. And so right now you articulated it in a way where it was kind of being present to agency, of being able to sort through that challenge that we're in right now. It's even difficult to even talk about. It's hard for me to even grasp, what's going on right now in the present. But there is a almost like meeting the moment, the challenge with agency within the medium. Whatever the future of cinema will be, it's another opportunity to kind of engage the resuscitation machine, right? And so, and I know the film kind of ends closer to that with the inquiry into AI and that part in particular, and towards the last fourth of the film, it starts to, I think, for me, kind of get into this inquiry. Before that, I want to talk about, or a little later, about the supercuts and also your use of the split screen, which I thought was very interesting. But right now, since we're kind of on AI, your commentary isn't as you're kind of leaving us much more in inquiry towards the end. So if there's anything else you'd like to say about that, and kind of where you're leaving us, and what it says about both the future at large, but also maybe what you're thinking about in terms of going next with this.
Okay, I'll try. And I think I have two answers that are kind of contradictory. One is we can't relinquish our ability to recognize the truth when we see it. You know, whatever technologies are interceding in that exchange, that's important. It's important for our ability to function as like members of a so-called democracy. So I don't see the solution to that being in other software. I don't think machines are going to tell us which machines are lying to us. I think that really is on us, and I think the narration says as much. That responsibility will continue to belong to us. And I think that's going to be difficult. It's going to be harder. We're going to have to use the skills. We're going to have to develop new ones. But I have to hold on to that as a necessary part of our existence moving forward. We're already in a fucked up dystopia, but that's, I think, Jordan Peele was onto something with that. So yes, we cannot let go of that. The other answer, I want to go back to my sort of historical personal narrative about Filmforum, because I was also a student, in addition to Tom Anderson and James Benning and others, I was a student of Chick Strands at Occidental in the 80s. And Filmforum just showed Chick's film Soft Fiction last weekend, I believe. And that had just come out when I was started as an undergraduate at Occidental. And so she showed it to us, and she would sit in the back smoking, and at the end of the film, the students wanted to know, like, which of those first-person interviews, which were real and which were fictional, and her response was like, "What do you want to know that for?" And if you know Chick, that's like a pretty good impression. But what she was telling us, and I think this planted that seed pretty early on, was that truth could be a creative variable, and that could be a source of really interesting artworks. And so I think there's room for both of those things. And I think, there's a part of me that loves the things that I see coming out of some of these Gen AI platforms, and they're doing things, blending components that we recognize and ones that we don't, and thinking about those things. I don't know, I think we have to embrace the contradictions. This is not something to be resolved with watermarks or legislation or, sort of protocols or the guardrails. I think this is something that's part of an ongoing negotiation, and we're going to have to sort it out as we move forward. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. The sorting out is a part of how I saw a bit of the assemblage of the film with the supercuts and the split screen. I first want to go into the split screen. It's used in such a wonderful way, because when it is used in cinema, it's seldom used, but when it is used, it's much more like plotting. There's like a plot here, and there's another one over there. And here, it's from taking a bit from one of your books, the analog digital, like there's this toggle between, like, yes, you're seeing it there and you're seeing it there. It's not so much about plotting. I mean, if it is, it's a very, very abstract plotting of society that you're thinking about briefly when you're looking at those two things. But it's more of like you said in your book, it's more pleasurable to see these two and to just consider what it is that we're looking at here. You have the date, right? And it's just a fascinating way to use the split screen, and use it quite a bit. And so I wanted to see if you can just say a little bit more about that, the use of split screen and your thinking around it.
So I think the way I want to answer that is in terms of affordances. And one of the dilemmas when you go to make a video essay is whether the argument, like we think of it in a scholarly context, does this argument lend itself to the videographic form, or should it just be a written text essay? And sometimes, for some topics, yeah, they really should just be written text essays. And the worst way, I'm sorry, you all who were in that class, this is going to be a repetition. The worst way to make a video essay is to start from a pre-written text and convert it, because then the process becomes basically illustration. You're adding the images that maybe you otherwise would have had to describe in your text essay. The way I do it, and the way I think that results in the most interesting videographic work is when the writing and the editing happen in parallel and literally sometimes in dialogue with each other. The moments that still make me the happiest in this film are the ones where I kind of talk back to the family, Nancy. When I talk back to the screen, you know, and it's like, you know, as a matter of fact, the funeral sequence was believable. So that's a case of doing something that the videographic form can really uniquely do. Also, you know, coming down to it and just saying like, that was a really awesome sequence, or she's a great skater. We don't do that stuff in peer-reviewed scholarly academic publications, right? That's an indulgence that we're allowed in the videographic form that's a little different. So split screens, for me, falls into this category because, oh, that's something that I actually couldn't do, or I'd have a very hard time simulating through some version of ekphrasis on the page. This is something that is going to be uniquely kind of conveyed through the videographic form, because I can do split screens or cut out the sound or you know, slow it down, you know, step print it, make a still frame. All of those kinds of things get to the unique affordances of the video form that kind of justify its place in the scholarly work, I guess.
And since you said ekphrases, that when watching the film, I had this experience of that kind of text-image relationship, but I don't know if text is the right word, but it's a commentary. But we do kind of consider that maybe this was some kind of writing, some kind of essay, but the way that you have the commentary kind of not just say something about the image, but rather say something about maybe what we're imagining as a third image, right? The marriage between what's going on in front of us and then what we're thinking about. And somehow, you know, like in a comic, it'd be the thought bubble. Somehow your commentary is pointing at what may be in our thought bubble. And I just wanted to see if you can say a little bit about, and then I'll go back to the supercut, but something about just your commentary. I know you already said a bit about it, but how you approached it, because we see, and this might be a good segue into the supercut. We see on YouTube, there's a lot of video essayist type clips, more and more, and it's I think growing genre in YouTube studies, if we can say that. And but the way you do it, you can kind of feel this knowledge of voice-over kind of more formally in cinema and how it was done in many different ways. You're bringing, I think, I don't know if formality is the word, but a dynamic way of approaching voiceover and commentary that on the internet, on YouTube, is usually not there. So if you can say a little bit about commentary and voiceover.
Yeah, so I think I have to bring it back to Tom Anderson. Los Angeles Plays itself was an inspiration for this film on many, many levels. There are sequences in here where I stole Tom's cadences, where I literally just like reproduced his way of speaking or his way of writing. In fact, an earlier film of mine, Screening Surveillance, was it was 2017, 2018, and in that one, I explicitly and embarrassingly did an impression of Enki King, who was my classmate at CalArts, Tom's narrator, who has this amazing, gravelly, kind of world-weary voice. He's Tom's surrogate, and I tried so hard to sound like Enki. And so that sort of the literalness of the voice comes from those kinds of things. I saw and liked a lot of Chris Marker films, and I've actually kind of, with another kind of project that I've returned to now, returning to that idea of sort of essayistic or epistolary subjectivity in that project, but that's quite different. So I've always loved the essayistic mode and the ability to merge the personal viewpoint with a more scholarly, analytical, critical, whatever you want to call it, viewpoint, like where there are multiple takeaways. You can learn something about this person, but also learn something about their thinking, also learn something, an argument about the world. So I don't try to, that was another bit of feedback I got, was stop trying to talk like Enki. And so I kind of tried to sound more like myself with this narration this time around. But I think that's the best answer I have for that.
Well, let's, or maybe we can open it up soon, but just one last thing, circle back to the supercut. So we YouTube videos that are essayistic and that many of us may see on social media and this kind of growing genre, they often use this supercut. And so you cut between one film and another in a TV show, and this assemblage is, I think, with it, I don't know, with maybe the history of cinema now kind of more formally being, I guess, engaged. And maybe it's again the challenge of the current machine, the challenge of YouTube to cinema, and finding a way to navigate, maybe even integrate parts of it. But just the role of just editing and the supercut, and if that kind of relationship to what's going on YouTube played a role in not necessarily influencing how you were editing, but having some kind of dialogue with those forms of editing.
Yeah, so I was trained as an editor. I worked as an editor. I regard myself as an editor, not a director. And I think, you get the idea from this movie pretty clearly. I don't love movies. I'm not a cinephile. I actually do kind of love TV, but film is kind of a spillover from that for me. And what I love is not movies or narratives, but moments. I like clips. I like lines of dialogue. I like individual shots. I like things that happen in the blink of an eye. And so it's a gift to have this form that lets me just pull out those moments that quicken the heart, right? The things that are sort of like moments that I want to call attention to. And so I don't really do supercuts. There are people who are so good at them. Coco Nada, Alison Dufresne writes about that and also does them incredibly virtuosically. I've never done that, really. I have another project that I am working on, which is a long format video graphic work. It's a book length. It's for Jason Mattel's Lever Press book series of all video books. And there are only a couple of these that have come out so far. And that one does have so much material that I thought I'm gonna have to supercut this. But it's not, I don't know, it's not in my nature somehow. I prefer, kind of weaving things together, I think, more than blasting them out. I see the place of them, I appreciate them, I love them when they're done well, but it's not exactly my thing.
Great. Should we open it up a little bit? Is there time?
Yeah, if there's time. 2 questions.
Okay, great. Any questions for Steve? Yep. How'd you?
And how was the second part?
Here comes the microphone.
Calling it Reality Frictions. When did you think of it? And were you pleased?
That's not what you said. You said it a different way. So it was, I taught a class at UCLA for the incoming MFA directors called Reality Fictions, and showed a bunch of the films that were here. And then at some point, typing a file name, there was a typo. And I inserted an R where there hadn't been one before, and I was like, oh, that's a much better title. I'm sorry, that's the answer.
And it went quite well with what's going on in the world today. I think from fictions to frictions. Yeah. Any
We have one more.
another question? Yeah. I think here comes the mic.
Hello. Congratulations for the film. I felt very much inspired. I have two questions, and I would give a film recommendation, but you just said you don't like movies that much. But so I saw Video Heaven by Alex Ross Perry a couple months ago, and it's like a 3-hour video essay about the the portrait of the video stars in the movies. And I read that the film was not available to distribute commercially because of the copyright. So I was wondering, how would that work with your film? Second question is, I was trying to take some screenshots of Jane Campion Sweetie yesterday, and it was blocked on Criteria channel. And then I found a plugin that only did photos, and I was wondering if, do you think would be a difference of aesthetic if you just shot a TV playing that instead of the digital file, like because you said about the material aspect of the DVD? And the film recommendations, I'm from Brazil, so there's a movie called Gabriel and the Mountain, which is about a real person that went to Africa, and he died in the mountain, and then the movie hired an actor to play him, but all the side characters were real people that he met. So it's a very interesting movie because they act as themselves, but then they also they give like a type of testimony about the events. It was showed in Cannes in 2017. It's a very interesting movie. So thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to remember all the pieces of that. One is, the first dozen or so screenings of this that I did was bombarded by, what about this? What about that? It's like, guys, it's 68 minutes already. Like, it's a lot to ask of anybody to watch this film for that long. So I had to put some arbitrary boundaries around it. The visible evidence, a lot of the examples that I got, many were from Latin America, and there's like, this is a tradition. This is, you're missing whole, really interesting bodies of work here. And I had to say, like, okay, yes, maybe for part 2, but for now, I'm going to really focus on a Hollywood context. Partly that's what I know, that's what I have access to. But there's a lot of things out there that could have been part of this that just couldn't make it in. It's already too much. The one thing I told Diego before we started is, like, let's not spend too much time talking about copyright, because that is a bottomless pit for me, and I can and could talk about that way more than is interesting. One thing is, about, like, how does that affect, though, distribution? As an example, when Red Hollywood came out, they had a real hard time in '95 getting that film shown and getting it, just on screens, in festivals. It was a problem. 2013 was it? Los Angeles plays itself, so 20-some years later, it played everywhere. And it just was that the idea of fair use, and it's not that it's been solved, but the idea of transformation has really sunk in, and there are best practices that have been issued. Look at the American University best practices and fair use guides for the US context. Really effective at telling you what you need to do in order for those things to strengthen your fair use claim. You can always be sued, but these days you have a much firmer stance for that than you used to. As you saw, I do all my stuff, no copyright, no rights reserved, and I just don't want any part of it. And Critical Commons has been this space that's meant to be a kind of, a fuck you to the copyright industries. And, I don't want your protection, and I don't want your restrictions. So there used to be the thing, shooting off the screen used to be a thing that we had to do because it was called the analog exemption. Before we had DMCA exemptions for cracking the encryption on DVDs, that was what the MPAA told us to do. Just set up your camera, turn off the lights, it'll be fine. So they were worried about commercial reproduction, but the quality greatly suffers when you do that. This is all ripped DVD. This is 480p, and it looks pretty decent even on a big screen like this. I'm not a cinephile, and so a lot of those sort of like the fetishization of the image quality is not something that I go into that deep. But you should be able to work with a decent image when you're doing this kind of work. So I think it's important that we maintain, that we have the ability to work with stuff. There are tools, like it sounds like you found, for ripping things off of streams. It's illegal. Fair use doesn't apply if you don't legally source the original materials. So, anyway, I'm not a lawyer. And I have to say that. I'm supposed to say that whenever I go. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trained. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I think, I don't know if I got all the pieces of your question, but thank you.
Well, if I could say something about that. I mean, I think there's a lot of trepidation to work with a material like the way you are, and including Los Angeles Plays itself, Tom Anderson's use of it, and Red Hollywood before that, which I came to later. I don't remember how that was in screenings, but there's a if you can say a little bit about that, like I want to say bravery, but maybe that's not the right word. But a lot of us, I think, filmmakers want to use material, and there's a lot of unknowns, and if how much is it, the duration, but when I see this, I really see like the epitome of like, this is a learning. This is for learning. This is commentary on our times that we're in. Like, this is the stuff of art and even journalism, and it's just it seems like a great example. But if you can say a little bit about that and how you approached it, not fair use, but the approaching of the material, and how you were going to navigate that if it became an issue.
Yeah, so there are answers to that. The key is transformation, and I actually did submit this to, we have a terrific documentary legal clinic at UCLA that does analyses of works like this to let you know what level of problems you might have. And you need that if you're going to try to get errors and omission insurance, which is what you would need for real distribution, for like commercial distribution where it's going to be seen broadly. And you're going to make money off of it. This film actually is in distribution through Alexander Street, which is second to Canopy. Nobody's heard of it. It's second to Canopy in the educational market, but it's on their website. It says no copyright, no rights reserved. It's there. Anybody who downloads it, loads it, can do anything they want with it. But I did run the film by them, and they're like, yeah, this is pretty good. But they nailed it. There are, like, the scene with Johnny Depp when he's looking out the window, there's a music track, and I stripped it out. I cheated. I took the music that was playing in the original scene. I learned this from Allison Dufresne. And I replaced it with a music track that didn't have his voice. Johnny Depp is talking over that entire scene. I replaced his talking with my talking, and the lawyers were like, yeah, you're not transforming critically that scene at all. You are using the music from outside the film to do this other thing. And there was one other moment that they were like, yeah, you might have a problem there. But otherwise, don't worry about it. The transformation is profound and necessary, and we cannot, at this point in time, we cannot be inhibited from doing this kind of work because we're worried about copyright. And it doesn't matter. No matter how good your transformational gesture is, Disney or whoever could still sue you. And we're living through a time of crazy contradictions in terms of intellectual property law and what Gen AI is bringing into that mix. But that's way, way out of scope for this conversation. So for especially academic contexts, scholarly contexts, contexts where it's understood that you're not going to be making any money, you're not going to be harming the profitability of the original, this is really not, we shouldn't even be talking about this anymore. It's okay. Go do it. But I'm not a lawyer. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone.